Welcome to the podcast series, Ignite Your Life with the Walk of Christ. In this series, Brother Mercurio and I will be examining the teachings and the walk of Christ in depth. So join us weekly on this exciting podcast series and learn the deeper meaning of what Christ came here to teach us. Welcome, everyone. We are continuing our conversation about the walk of Christ. And today we are going to be covering that all famous passage, Matthew 7:13, enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many may enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow is the road that leads to life, and only few find it. Wow, that's like so powerful. I actually had a conversation with my proctor today and that got brought up. And that's why I was thinking this would be a really good conversation. We really got to talking about the path, taking that spiritual path that leads to what some people call the philosopher's stone, enlightenment. There's many different things that people, Christ consciousness. There's a lot of different things that people say, you know, that ultimate goal people are trying to get to.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really big spiritual concept in many ways, isn't it? I know it's in other spiritual paths too. This idea of the way and it's difficult to keep your feet on the path and all this kind of thing.
It really is, and I think that it is so true because that gate to spiritualism, one of the things that I was thinking about is a lot of people take the gate to spiritualism, don't they? They go to church.
The first path that people follow sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, they do. They join a religion, or they find an occult following, or a cult, or cult, CULT versus OCCULT. And some people find different ways to move forward. But one of the things that makes the difference is that wide gate is the gate that seems to be so easy to get through. So let's join a church, follow the rule. Here is your guidelines. It's spelled out very easily. Follow the 10 Commandments.
Right.
But what do you think the narrow path is? It's more esoteric, don't you think?
Yeah, I think it's, and again, we'll probably go into this more deeply around, your inner connection with Christ and your inner divine, because I think that's what guides you to it. I think the narrow way is obviously the ability to follow a kind of find your spirituality and follow a spiritual set of tenets or guidelines, whether they come from within or externally, without deviating from it. And so people often have this idea of, I must stick to these rules, I've got to stay there. And it almost becomes like initially a battle of wills, I think. But we can come on to that in a minute. But I think you're right about the wide path. People are looking for spirituality. They're looking for something. And they get drawn to various forms of spirituality. And as you say, it could be the church. It could be an esoteric group. It could be a New Age group, or maybe one of the other religions. It could be Buddhist, or it could, a lot of people love Buddhism. When I was a kid, I studied, in university, I studied Zen in the beginning, and that was amazing. It changed my way of thinking and actually helped me a lot more later on in my life.
Why do you think that it says that wide is the gate that leads to destruction? I mean, if it's the easy one to get to, okay? This gate obviously is the gate to spirituality. So if it's the easiest way to get there, it's the easiest way to follow because it's so wide and many can find it. That means it's like on the street corner, you drive by, there's a church. So if it's that easy, why is it saying that easy road leads to destruction? What do you think?
I think it's a bit like, I don't know if you've come across the book Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. It's a very old book. I think it was written, in history, a few hundred years ago. But one of the things about it is it's about this guy who's following his path. He's trying to find his way to back to the divine, essentially. But they tell it like a story, like he's going through a wilderness and he's going through mountains and stuff. And one of the points in the story, he's faced with the option of either going up the mountain and working hard on it and trying to strive to get to the top of the mountain, or he just takes the easy path, which is going around the side. It takes longer, but and also there are more pitfalls there because there are wild animals and there are other things at the base of the mountain, But actually, at some point, he realizes, actually, I've got to work at this. I've got to get up there. And I think he goes around to one side and then the other and faces problems. So he has to come back to the beginning again and start going up the mountain. And I wonder if it's really about working on yourself. It's very easy just to go out into the world, look around at all the different things, try a bit of this spirituality, try a bit of that, like many people do. People start off searching, don't they? And the broad path is to absorb everything and say, oh yeah, I'll have a bit of yoga and I'll have a bit of Christianity and I'll merge in a little bit of Buddhism or something. And you kind of get this hodgepodge of different kind of thing. And I think it's sort of like that in some ways. That's the broad path. And the pitfalls are psychological in a sense, because you never actually get to complete the training of one particular path. I think Dion Fortune, or one of the occult authors, says if you're going to do this properly, say you choose Christianity, then do Christianity first, get it out of the way, do the whole thing, and then decide what you want to do. So you go through one particular path of training that gets you to a level where you can then appreciate other things. Otherwise, it's sort of you're only collecting things, you're only like, that's my words, not hers. It's like having a collection of crystals or something like that. If you don't know what they do, it looks very pretty, it looks really nice, but I think the broad path is a bit like that. It's like, you're looking too broadly, you're looking outside and around, and you're not looking within,
Yeah, I also think too, this can be looked at so many different ways. This is what I love about the symbology. It can be like, you can take this angle, you can take that angle, and I think it's written this way so that you can process it at the level that you need to process, or how does it affect you now? And then like a year or two from now, it could be processed differently, because it affects you differently, or you're experiencing things differently. So like when I think about the churches on every corner, okay, that's easy, okay? And you show up for church every Sunday, you sing a little, you listen a little, you raise your hands up, you clap a little, you say a little prayer, and then all week long, what happens?
Right.
You get back, you have the affair, you meet up with your girlfriend, and you cheat on your wife, or you beat your kids, or you go ahead and smoke your dope, or get back into your drinking every day, or you're lying, or you're cheating people through business, or you're mean to people. It's like you're judgmental. It's like, oh, I had my spiritual moment for the week. And when I look at this, I think, okay, so I can see how that leads to destruction, because you're not applying these things instrumentally into your life. But it's also extremely basic. It's like, here's the rules. But people show up and, they clap their hands, raise their hands, sing a little, pray a little, and they think that's good enough, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I had Jesus for the week, okay?
Right,
and,
you get your hit,
Yeah, I know. And it's like, or they just, oh, I got saved, so I'm good to go. I got my free ticket to heaven now, so that means that I can do whatever, and it really doesn't matter. So it is destruction. It's like, you're not, like you said, you're not doing the inner work. You're not working on your mind. You're not working on your soul. You're not trying to do this full purification process. And I don't know everything, okay? But what I do know is what I know. And that's it. And what I do know from what I've experienced so far is that there are, I want to say programs, but it's not a program. There are traditions or orders that are out there and that teach a deeper meaning, and they get into the process of the purification of yourself. I know that you're part of one. I know I'm part of one. And I can tell you that the alchemical process that I've had to go through has been the hardest thing I've ever done and the most enlightening thing I've ever done. And so I can see how that would be like narrow. And I can see how that is, it's harder to find, and not very many people even decide to go that direction stay on that path, because it's hard.
That's right.
Yeah, so I don't know. There's a lot of different ways you can look at this. You can look at it like the buffet platter, like you said.
Yeah.
or actually the mundane way of doing things, or the muggle way, like like we say sometimes, non-magical people just doing your little process. Okay, I kept the Sabbath holy. I kept to the 10 Commandments, or at least 2/3 of it. But I asked for forgiveness, so it's all good. And I think that these people they're not getting through that narrow path of that place.
Yeah, no, I accept it. I'm kind of processing it really, because there's so many, as you say, there are a lot of ways to look at this, and I do think really narrow is when you're narrowing down your consciousness to a decision where you follow one particular way of doing things, which hopefully is aligned with your inner self and your higher and divine inspirations, or God, or whatever you want to call that.
Mm-hmm.
It's very easy to chop and change and kind of do different things and get drawn into the mundane, as you say, and just maybe attend church on a Sunday, and the rest of, or whatever it is you do, your temple or your Buddhist center on one time a week, and the rest of it is you're back in mundane way of thinking. I think it's an inner thing. I definitely think it's more of an inner thing. It's choosing a kind of, the key to the gate is inside you. It's not externally. Whereas the broad path, it tends to be very external, doesn't it? Very kind of externally driven.
Yeah, actually, you're so right about that. That key is inside of you. It's the part that most people lose. They don't realize, and it kind of goes back to that scripture that you and I were talking about when I think it was the disciples that were asking Christ, they were like, hey, where's the kingdom of heaven? And he's like, well, it's not to the left, the right, or up or down. It's actually, and they're like, hey, point that direction. I want and I think they were trying to see where that location was in the sky, like that star over here, is it that star over there? If you think about it from their mindset, in those days, heaven's above you, it's way up there. So, and what do we say when we look at the stars? We're looking at the heavens, and so they were kind of processing it from that. So they're like, where's that kingdom? Where's God at? And this is where so many people get lost, is they don't realize that the potential is within you. And that's why that pathway is so narrow. Yeah. And it's because most people do not do that inner work.
Yeah, exactly.
To purify, alchemize, elevate that level of consciousness.
Yeah. That leads me to the question then, what does it take then to move from that external way of looking things? Where is heaven? Is it over there? Is it in Germany somewhere?
Yeah, it's Germany.
And the famous Shangri-La of the Buddhists, it's supposed to be a location. Where do you move from that point to the kingdom of heaven is at hand, and it's here and now, and it's inside you, How do we shift from one state of consciousness to the other? That's my question, really, generally in life. It's sort of, I suppose a lot of these spiritual paths are designed to lead you to that understanding. Eventually at some point they try to lead you to the internal world and a much more of a revelatory, experiential or gnosis process. Mm-hmm. Because you do find eventually you're just not you can keep looking around the world for years, and people do, right? They spend years and years looking for spiritual paths, looking for things, and eventually they find, it's in me.
Okay, so how do I access that within myself? That's the bigger question, like how do I access that within myself? Because that's the hardest thing to believe, is that it's within you. And I'll tell you a little story that happened to me. Years ago, when I got introduced to Gabriel, I was introduced to him originally by this Taoist monk, and it's a weird story. Yeah, I'll tell it. So basically, I was working with this Taoist monk who's very esoteric, very supernatural, I guess is the word. I don't know. He had a lot of abilities, and he was telepathic, telekinetic, everything. You know, you name it, he had it. He was really good at astral projection and astral travel. He had this ability to be able to kind of pull me out and take me with him. And that was always fun. But basically, he was monitoring my every move. Like, so he was able to do like remote viewing, basically, and he would keep up on my thoughts, you know, like, because he was telekinetic. No, not which one's the one where telepathy. Yeah. And he was able to do that. So he was always keeping up with, you know, monitoring my every move. Like, you know, basically kind of think of it like, you know, you're at a bowling alley and you've got the bumper guards, you know. It's like he never let me go into the gutter, you know. It's like he always kind of kept me in line, like pushed me back, you know. It's like this is the area that you got to stay within. And he had to go take a trip, and he said, I'm going to be leaving for 2 weeks. And he goes, but normally I can split my consciousness and I could still leave a part of me with you. He goes, but where I'm going, I'm not going to be able to do that. I have to have all of me to go. So he said basically I'm not going to leave you alone. He goes, I'll leave you with a friend. And I said, well, does this friend have a name? And he said, yes, he's known by many names in many cultures and, you know, many different times all over the world. He goes, but you would know him as Gabriel. I said, oh, wow. Like, the Archangel Gabriel? And he's like, yeah, that's him. And I said, okay. At that time, you know, because Patrick was in a physical body. So my thought was, somebody's going to come knocking on my door. You know what I mean? I really thought any moment, you know, so I was like, does he have a body? And he goes, sometimes. And I was like, I was kind of waiting. He goes, don't worry, he'll show up. And I said, okay. So I'm waiting, thinking someone's going to knock on my door, make a phone call, you know, something like that, right? It was going to manifest in physical form. But the next thing I know, I started hearing this inner voice, and he was basically having to prove to me that he was real. Like, you're going to go to the bank today, you're going to think your account's overdrawn, but you're actually going to have $32 in your account. Like, he would give me all these little proofs. Yeah, it was really interesting. So I finally started to learn to trust him because, you know, it wasn't a person I could make a phone call and say, hey, telepathically, I got this message, but I want to make sure I got it. Yeah, so it was, so this started this process, and he basically introduced me to a lot of new ways of thinking. Okay, when he showed up, he basically wanted me to go through this process of, who are you? And that was like one of the first things he said. He goes, who are you? And I'm like, I'm Michelle. And he said, he's like, no, who are you? Oh, I'm a mother. No, you're not. Who are you?
That's a very Zen thing, actually.
Yeah. So he kept on going through this. He goes, go meditate on it. You know, so I'd go into this deep meditation, and I'd have this astral experience, and oh, I'm Mary, Mother of Jesus, you know, and then I'd start crying, and I'd say, no, that's my mind. That could never be her. She's too pure. And then next thing I know, I was on the cross. And I was like, oh my God, I'm Christ. I'm fixing to be executed, you know? And I was like, no, that can't be right, you know? And I'm like crying. I'm like, I'm not good enough for any of this stuff. I am just this normal, mundane girl, and there's nothing that great about me. And I kept on like pressing down any kind of thought that might come up that was more divine. And I think what he was doing was he was trying to show me to look at my own personal divinity. It's not that I was Christ or Mary or any of that kind of stuff. He was trying to make a point, because I kept on refusing anything that sounded too great. And I think that if you use that as an example, most of us people, you know, on this earth, we refuse the idea, kingdom of heaven or the Christ lives within you idea. And that you are God, or you are the essence of God, or God lives within you, or the kingdom of heaven's within you, however you want to word it. People refuse that. And what they do is because they feel like there's only one God. And if I say I'm God, then I'm being sacrilegious, or, you know, all of that. And
absolutely.
I think that that's the hardest thing for people to realize, because they don't know how to make sense of the idea of bringing that to the forefront of your mental thoughts, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, because no one really teaches you how to do that. There's no, in the natural world, the mundane world, there's no instruction about how to do that, Actually, I found quite an interesting quote today that might inform this. It's a Kabbalistic quote from a rabbi. And what he writes is, aren't all religions equally true? No, all religions are equally false. The relationship of religion to truth is like that of a menu to a meal. The menu describes the meal as best it can. It points to something beyond itself. As long as we use the menu as a guide, we do it honor. When we mistake the menu for the meal, we do it and ourselves a grave injustice.
Wow, that's a lot to chew on.
It's a lot, isn't it? But I think it sort of alludes to this in the sense that, religions are there to guide us, to guide and regulate life. They're not the ultimate thing, but they're the door. They might be the gate that leads you into that process of finding your inner self. However, it does require inner work because you don't automatically get that, You can go to church every Sunday, but it doesn't make you a master of yourself, does it? So
No.
it is about finding your inner spirituality, and it can definitely lead you to that point, but at the end it's your journey. It's a really I think that's the narrow path, is when you finally realize that actually it's just my journey and I have to follow this particular relationship with the divine and allow that to guide my life. Then you're on the narrow path. But it's so easy to be pulled off it because your mundane self pops up and says, oh yeah, I need to go and drink alcohol now, or I don't know, whatever it is. It's like there are things that are always pulling you back and forth and off that path and back on it, which is okay. It's part of it. It's part of the process. Especially once you've realized what the path is, you can go back to it. But I think the narrowness of it, coming back to that concept, is the inner guidance. It's knowing the map is not the territory, that the guidance comes from you. I like that one of the things in Zen I quite like, and I think Christ also alluded to actually, is that life is like looking. The Zen story is that life is like looking at a mirror that's covered in dust, and your work in the life is to wipe away the dust until you really see yourself.
Oh wow!
And what that's saying is a bit similar to the kingdom of heaven is at hand. You just can't see it, kind of thing. It's, to me anyway, it's sort of that you have to work on yourself in order to be able to see your true inner value and spiritual life as it is. I think we're all adepts already. We're all like masters, but we're so covered up by all the other stuff in life that we can't see that.
Well, yeah, it's life that does it to us. I mean, we start off in life, this beautiful spirit that smiles all the time, laughs all the time, enjoys life all the time, that no matter what is fearless. It's like if you think of a child, right? And they're learning how to walk. And what do? They fall and they get right back up and they smile and they take a couple of steps and they're like, the mouth is going to open and they're super excited. And I'll never forget when my son was learning how to swim, and he was on the swim team, and he was only like 5 years old. And it was his first competition. And here he was swimming, and he was so excited.
Wow.
And he had his mouth open, because he's like, like his mouth was open, and we're like screaming at him, telling him, shut your mouth, Taylor, because we didn't want to get water in his mouth, but he was so happy and so excited to take that challenge on and do that. And as life progresses, somebody says, oh, you did it wrong. You're supposed to do it like this. Oh, you're not good enough because you did it like this. Or you're not like everybody else, so there's something wrong with you. And this progression of, pain that gets inflicted on us, we start developing this fear of anything, of developing friendships, of having love in our life, fear of success, fear of failure, fear of love, fear of being hurt, fear of everything. And suddenly that inner light that was within us gets dulled. I'll tell you another funny story. When my daughter was really young, before my son was born, she used to ask all these really good questions. Like, she's very interesting child, and she asked me, she was asking me about God, and she was asking me about just all these questions about it. I said to her, when you're first born, you're this beautiful light, and it's just so brilliant and so shining and so happy, and God just flows all through you, you're perfect. But as life starts happening, it's like when you go to school and some kid makes fun of you or pushes you on the ground, it just dims that light a little. And then you keep on, as you get older, bad things happen to you, people hurt you, and that light gets dimmed even more and more. And I said, and eventually those people become angry, and they become resentful, and they become hurtful, and they say mean things, and they hurt other people because that light is so dim and so light that it just can't shine anymore. So what's funny about this story is one day her dad came home, and he was all angry because he had a bad day at work, and he was like, Michelle, and she looked at him and she goes, Daddy. Like that. And he looks at her and he goes, what? And she goes, you lost your light.
Wow. I love that. Oh, out of the mouths of babes, as they say. Wow, that's so cool.
I know. I loved it. And it was funny because he's like, what have you been teaching this child? And so that's my ex-husband, by the way.
Right.
Not married anymore. It's a funny story, and and it really kind of like shows you what happens to us. Yes. And because we become so fearful, then you start throwing in dogmatic religion that's fear-based, and it just amplifies that you're a bad person. And so we just keep on living out that life, it's like, just keep on asking for forgiveness, and you're going to be okay. You narrow out the possibility of your personal greatness. You start believing that it's impossible. Like, who am I to say I'm great?
I think it's a sort of nature thing as well, because nature sets this up when you're very young to become a kind of people pleaser, because in order to get food, you have to do what mommy wants, or in order to get other things in your life, things go a lot better if you please your parents. And I think your ego starts to get built around that, doesn't it? And if you don't resolve it, you can end up in that dynamic in all sorts of situations, including the religion obviously has capitalized on that a lot in the past and made people guilty and then forced them to do things. Look at the history of the European politics in the 1500s, and when the Catholic Church was much more of a political organization, and there was this whole thing of indulgences. You could, if you pay 500 ducats or whatever the coins were in those days, you can then have a prayer, which means you definitely go to heaven.
You're kidding. I've never heard this before.
Oh man, this was a huge thing, and this is why Protestantism came along, because Martin Luther said, right, I've had enough of this, and he nailed his 900 Theses or whatever it was onto one of the doors in Germany of the Parliament building or something, and basically he was saying, screw this, I'm not doing Catholicism anymore, we're going to change it. And that led to Protestant theology, because people were getting so tired of these indulgences and having to basically give all their money to the church in order to get into heaven. So this is what causes that. It starts very young, doesn't it? It starts young when you're, as you say, the kids are being conditioned to think a certain way, and their ego builds around that. There's a great quote in the Bible on that, isn't there? There's like, when I was a child, I spake as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. And for now, I see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know even as also I am known. But essentially saying what we've just discussed, the more you start off as a child and you're thinking one way, but you build up all of these assumptions and conditions and ways of acting and behaving in the world, because that's your survival mechanism. And at some point you have to remove that. A lot of spiritual traditions talk about dying to your past and waking up to a new life. That's a thing in baptism, isn't it? Your old life is gone and now you're born into a new life, or the second death. that's talked about in some spiritual traditions, which is basically removing the ego. It comes back to the cross. Why did Jesus go on the cross? And it's very symbolic of like destroying that egotistical side of us, which is made of the four elements, and actually rising up to the spiritual aspects of ourselves. I've got another story. Shall I do another story?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, absolutely.
There's a story in one of Nietzsche's teachings, The Three Stages of Man, I think it's called, and it basically says, when you're a kid, it's as if you're loading all these things onto your back, and you have like an animal next to you, which is like your animal nature, and you're piling all this stuff onto the animal, which are the conditioning and the rules that we just talked about. And then the next phase is when all of that stuff is in front of you and turns into a lion, and you have to battle the lion in order to get rid of all of those things. And then finally you're a man. It might not be a lion, actually, it might be a dragon with all the scales. Yeah, actually. Sorry, getting the wrong. But basically, you battle this creature that represents all of these conditionings that you have, and then finally, once you've killed every single scale on the dragon, you can walk freely as a human being. In your full consciousness of yourself as you are. And I think that's what has to happen before you can find the narrow gate and before you can find your inner spirituality. You have to kind of deal with all of this conditioning you've been given. You know what I mean?
You're so right. You're absolutely right. I'm gonna tell you something. So I do this thing where I work with people for 6 months. They meet with me twice a week, and we are basically going over every single negative thought that they have. Like literally, it's like journaling what came out this time, pulling up all this negativity that's, repeating over and over in your head. And we start working on changing those thoughts by really looking at them directly and saying, is this your truth? Is this your truth? I mean, really, I know that you're saying this to yourself, but is it true? Like, I can't lose weight. You can't lose weight, or you're just choosing not to lose weight because you don't want to stop eating those Pop-Tarts or something, every morning.
Interesting. It gives you the choice. It's giving you the choice back, isn't it? By saying, did you choose it, rather than, I can't,
Right, exactly. So like we go through this process of really examining the thoughts, and believe it or not, most people, when I'm doing this and I'm helping them process this, they never even thought this way in their entire life, ever. Like, I never thought of that. I never saw it that way. Most people do that. And they're like, wow, you're really good at this. How do you do this? And I'm like, because I'm thinking outside the box. You're inside of a box. I'm outside of the box. I'm seeing things that you can't see, right? So as we go through this process, then we start with the reprogramming, and we use hypnosis to knock it all out. Okay. Right. And then typically at that point, I started adding in tools. Like, when things come up, here's how you handle this. When things come up, here's how you handle it. So suddenly you discover it, and then you reprogram it, and then you've got tools to handle things. At this point, typically almost 99% of these people suddenly have this spiritual awakening. It's the weirdest thing.
Wow.
Yeah. They start suddenly wanting, I was wondering, I don't know if this was part of the program, but I was wanting to learn a little bit more about spiritualism, and I saw on your website you're a spiritual teacher, and I was wondering if you could teach me to meditate, or can you teach me to manifest, or that's the only two that they know of most of the time, manifesting and meditation, right? So I'm like, yeah, you're ready, and the process of teaching them some of these spiritual techniques elevate themselves and give them back their power. Suddenly, it's like they become empowered. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because that's basically what you just said. It's literally like transmuting the mind. You have to do the inner work, the mental work. And this is why last time we were talking, we're like, isn't this whole path really psychological? Because isn't that what Jesus was saying? It's like, hey, you need to go get some mind work done. It's the inner work, and the inner work is changing the way you think, because you've programmed your whole life to think a certain way, and there's no way around that unless you have a spiritual teacher. Bottom line, it's, you were saying, how do we do it? Well, I know you know how to do it, but you were like, just kind of posing the question as part of this process. You wouldn't have been able to do it without a spiritual teacher. I wouldn't have been able to do it without a spiritual teacher. This is part of the process. These are people that know the process, take you through that alchemical process of moving through. And how do you find these people? Very difficult, right? It's almost impossible. Like, it's like, how do you find a group or an order or a tradition that has these spiritual teachers that are going to take you through this alchemical process of transmuting the mind? So that all that junk that we've been programmed into our whole life, we suddenly become free of, and we're able to move through that path without the interruptions. Well, that path is very narrow, right? And it says in the scripture that it's hard to find. Well, yeah, it's hard to find. How do you find it? There's another scripture that tells you how to find it. Okay. That's seek and you shall find, knock and the door shall be answered. And when I was looking for this path, I knew it existed because Patrick did it. Okay. And he passed away. And so there was only a certain point in which I could go with him, right? And I knew that he belonged to all these different esoteric organizations. And so I started looking, and I was looking and looking and looking, and, like Masonic orders, Freemasons, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of Knights of Templar, White Hats. These are all like men organizations. And so I was like, being a female, I need to try to find that. And so I started Googling, esoteric orders with, that let women in, or spiritual organizations for women. And, I just kept on looking and changing the way I worded it. Every time I would search, I went on the search for several years, and I just kept at it because I knew it existed. And
I think that's it. So because you're showing intent, aren't you? At that point, you're showing you have an intention that you want to do this, and I think that's what the knock and the door shall open passage is about. It has to come from you at some point. People aren't going to spoon feed you spirituality. It's not going to happen. So, but once you're ready, there's this other phrase. It's not in the Bible, but it's when the pupil is ready, the teacher shall appear. And I think that does happen once. Almost like the universe somehow knows that you're looking for some help, you're looking for some way to get out of it. It'll present someone like you found Patrick. And, I don't think he's gone. I think he's still with you, but I don't know whether you believe in that sort of thing. But
oh, I do. I believe it.
He's still guiding you. Yeah, it has to start coming from the person, doesn't it? And that's the prompting of your inner adept or your inner master that we all have, There's one of my teachers once said, there is an adept within you. And that really transformed my way of thinking. It was sort of like, why are you sitting at the bottom of the mountain sipping hot chocolate and enjoying your life when actually you can start realizing this adept, and it'll give you the power to climb the mountain and reach that spiritual height. And it was like, oh yeah, that's it, isn't it? It's about allowing that inner part of you to manifest and develop. And to do that, you have to, as we've just said, you have to remove all of these blocks, all of these things that you've been conditioned with since childhood. So you can see the kingdom of heaven clearly. You can't see it. Nobody can see it until they've actually cleared their vision a bit. So,
oh, that is so well said. Yeah, that's so well said. That's the problem, is that most people are seeking it through TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, books, and this is a great start, because I put stuff on TikTok and YouTube and everything, I have stuff everywhere for this very reason, is that I want to show people that there is a path forward. That's not the way you're going to get there. It's just listening to me on all these things is not going to get you to that space. It might help you develop the courage to take the path, but it doesn't necessarily get you through that narrow gate.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, and and I know you've probably seen this too. It's like I've seen people that have joined our order, and I have seen them quit right in the very first stage. I've seen people go up, work their way through the tree of life, and they get through a couple of levels and they quit. And that's because it gets harder as you go along.
Yeah, and it doesn't stop. The work doesn't actually stop.
Oh, God, I just had a big lesson recently, and it was like a huge one for me. And I mean, and I was like crying my eyes out, like reaching out to like everybody. It's like, okay, I'm gonna call this proctor. I'm gonna call this one. I know you're not my proctor, but hey, you're my friend. I'm gonna call you.
Yeah.
I was like, I literally was having a straight up meltdown, and I needed to go through that process to overcome it, because what I ended up discovering was that all my life I've been criticized, and I've been told you're too much, you're a lot to handle, all that kind of stuff. I have a big personality. I'm a Leo. My moon is Aries.
Oh, that's right.
And
yeah.
my rising is Scorpio. Okay. It's a lot. Okay. Yeah. And there's a lot of people that are very attracted to that. I mean, super attracted to that. So they're drawn to me, but then they see it and they get in the middle of it and it starts agitating them. And they start criticizing me for various reasons, for whatever I do. That action pissed me off. That action pissed me off. That action pissed me off. And every single thing that I do is always with the intention of serving and helping. I got triggered. It just tumbled me down. Like, it triggered me hardcore over something so minor. Like, it is so minor. Like, it's not even worth having a conversation over. But I got triggered over it. And it started me in this whole, like, something's wrong with me. I need to change my personality. Everybody thinks I'm too much. I need to work on this. Maybe this is my alchemy. I need to work on my personality. And I ended up having a meeting with Papa Doc. I don't know if you know him. Yeah, I had a meeting with him. He gave me a come to Jesus meeting. And
Right.
I mean, he's a preacher.
Very wise man. Yeah.
Yeah. He's all like, I'm gonna set you straight, Sora. You listen to me, And then, of course, I had a meeting with Pluto and her being my proctor. So then she really got upset. I mean, she got on this like, I'm gonna tell you right now, you are.
I know when she gets into that. Yeah.
When she gets like really worked up over it. Like, everything that you are is so that you can reach this divine purpose. And if people can't see that light, what I mean? It was just like, you have to be alive. You have to be this, and you need to like celebrate in that. And then all of a sudden this like aha moment came to me, and I realized, that these were people reflecting on that energy. They were reflecting on my life. It forces them to look at themselves and their own insecurities. Yeah. Oh, my insecurities, I'm not smart enough. Oh, my insecurities, I'm not pretty enough. Oh, my insecurities are I don't have a voice, or I'm this or this or this or this. And here you are doing this, and it seems so easy for you, and you're pissing me off because all you're doing is showing me how I'm not good enough. So this has happened my whole life. And wow. I came to this realization that people criticize me because they come in contact with that light, and it forces them to look at their inner self.
Yep.
Something that's lacking or needs to work on or whatever, right?
I think that's a phenomenon that happens with humanity. We project onto others, don't we? We project our own insecurities and all kinds of stuff onto other people. Classically with leaders, people have authority problems, will start getting angry with the boss and manipulating them and so on, even if they've not done anything. It's sort of like a... I think that's how this works. And so it's not you. Of course it's not you, it's them. It's like how they're, maybe you have things to work on, we all do, but it's not, I think what this is about is exactly that. It's, as you say, reflecting your light, and it's making them, when someone's a light bearer who really shines it, I think it does highlight other people's problems and difficulties, doesn't it?
It definitely highlights their problems. And so the point behind me telling you this is because this is still part of my own alchemy. And the alchemy is not for me to change, it's to recognize. And that's for me to let go of this insecurity of being too much.
And it's all those issues that you're facing, it's really all of their conditioning they've had since childhood, isn't it? That's what's coming up there. I just think that's what's driving them to act a particular way, is all of that conditioning that we were talking about earlier. You get brainwashed with as a child.
When we're talking about this narrow path, moving forward and going through it, it is a never-ending climbing up that mountain that seems to be endless. It's like, when do we get to the top? I don't know. And is there a top? I was even talking to Pluto, right, who's visually looks like she's at the top, right? Because she's an adept. And so she's like, I still have alchemy. I still have fears. I still have things I'm working on. So it's like, does it ever end?
Yeah, so basically you'll never stop climbing the mountain, is what you're saying.
Yeah, basically. The gate is narrow, and that's why few people find it, and that's why few people stick to it. I mean, some people just turn back around and go through the wide gate.
Too much for people sometimes. They might not be ready for it in their soul, or they might need to do more work to get to the point where they can do that.
Do you think that that's why there's reincarnation? Or I don't even know. Do you believe in reincarnation? I
personally do. I personally do, because I think this life's not enough to learn all the things we need to learn.
I actually do believe in it as well, and I think that I kind of think the same way. I just think, here I am, I'm 57 years old, and I'm sitting here thinking, will I live long enough to complete this path? I mean, will I ever get in the top of the Severa? Or am I only going to get like 1/3 up? It's like, how far can I get before I die? And is that going to be enough? And I'm thinking, I'm probably going to have multiple lifetimes to be able to finish this out.
I think we probably already had multiple lifetimes, even just to get to this point. So
that's true.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's more in store. I mean, it's one of life's great mysteries, isn't it? Experience that pulls out your abilities, and it's a bit like when you're writing a script. It's like, because I write scripts as well, but it's like you have to make the character go through difficult situations in order to reveal the character. You could say it's a state of mind. In the Bible, it says, "My Father's house has many mansions," and I think that kind of alludes to this, that there are many states of mind. A mansion is a state of mind, and so if you shift yourself up to a particular state of mind, then you have certain experiences. If you're in another state of mind, like you're down lower on Malkut, you'll have very mundane experiences. So I think it's learning to shift your consciousness through the different levels and states of being, and of course the kingdom of heaven is one of the states of being can reach. You can stay in it long is the other challenge, but you can reach it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this has probably opened up a lot of questions for a lot of people. Some people are probably wondering, well, how do you find this? How do you find that path? How do you find that narrow path? How do you find that esoteric order that helps you teaches you how to move through the alchemy and gives you the step-by-step process? In the description, I'm gonna put my contact information, and I'm gonna put Mercurio's contact information as well. He is in...
At the moment, I'm in Australia, actually.
Oh, okay. I'm in the US, obviously, and if there is any questions that you would like to know, or you want some suggestions or path moving forward, we can give you your contact information. This has been a really interesting conversation, and some of you guys, y'all want to take that wide. That's cool. Whatever you want to do, your soul is the one that guides you, and it's completely up to you which direction that you decide to take. But those of you that want to take a different path, and you want to learn more, and you want to go through that purification, that alchemy, those doors can be open for you. We'll see you in the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you later.
Thank you very much. See you later.